So, my name is Michelle Lopez, and our moderator for tonight is Claire Clark. And we are both AmeriCorps wildlife educators with the Nevada Department of Wildlife for the Southern region located out of the Las Vegas office. And tonight we will be talking about our famous desert bighorn sheep. So, if you guys would like to go ahead and test out your chat boxes, I just want to know if anyone has seen a desert bighorn sheep before. You can go ahead and pull up those chat boxes and let us know in there if you have, if you haven't, if maybe you have, maybe you were driving pretty fast and you saw a blob, maybe it looked like a desert bighorn sheep. You have some no's, some yes, some yeses. This weekend, oh cool. Yes, that's awesome. I have yet to hold the privilege of seeing one in the wild. Claire and I actually went out to go look for some, and we did not see any the whole time, but on the way home, she had seen some on her drive back, and I hadn't. Sadly, no, but they are one of your favorites. Very cool. Every day in and out of your backyard. That's really cool. Columbia Gorge? Not yet. Awesome. Well, it's nice to know that you guys have had pretty close experience with some of them if you've been able to hold that privilege. So tonight we're going to go into a general overview of the desert bighorn sheep. So we'll start off with an introduction, then go into their habitat, diet, adaptations, those horns, of course, their life cycle, some population threats, and our involvement and interaction with them. So desert bighorn sheep are the official state animal of Nevada. They typically live between 6 to 8 years old in the wild, and a female is called a ewe, while a male is called a ram. They are around 5 feet long, 3 feet tall, and around 140 pounds. So I hope you guys all kept your chat boxes open because I want to know, what do you notice? Whether you're looking at this picture or you are thinking of desert bighorn sheep, what are some things or characteristics that stick out to you? Their horns. Horns and white rump. That white little rump is just so famous. Horns, their legs, that's a good one. Large horns. Live on rocks, yes. Their ears, that's good too. I like how you guys notice some things that may often get overlooked. White rumps, large horns, other than bighorn sheep, yeah. Awesome. Well, these are all things that we're going to cover, whether it's their physical adaptation or their habitat. We'll just kind of go over a general overview of all of it. So desert bighorn sheep live in the low desert, which is characterized by hot summers with little annual precipitation. These deserts are rough, rocky, and have steep terrain, broken up by canyons and washes. This habitat can be found throughout the southwest mountain ranges of the United States. So from southern Nevada, Arizona, southeast California, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, Texas. It even ranges between Canada all the way down to Mexico. And as many of us know, living in arid Nevada, it can get very hot, which makes us tired and thirsty. So to work around this, desert bighorn sheep will rest in the shade to save up their energy and retain water during the hottest parts of the day. Desert bighorn sheep are herbivores, but their diet depends with the habitats and the seasons that they're in, and kind of varies on what is available. So this means that they are opportunistic feeders that adapt their diet to whatever forage they have the opportunity to eat. They prefer to eat grasses, forbs, and shrubs. Some of their favorites are acacia, catclaw, and sweetbush. And desert bighorn actually don't need water to drink during winter when green vegetation is available because they can get their water from the plants. But during summer, they'll drink at water holes at least once every 3 days. They have a complex 9-stage digestive process that allows them to maximize the removal of nutrients from their food. It helps them absorb nutrients from tough desert plants like mesquite and catclaw and water from cacti. They also regurgitate their food to chew it as cud before swallowing it for final digestion, just to get as much of those nutrients out as they can. As being part of a food web, they do have their predators, which are mountain lions, wolves, bobcats, coyotes, and even golden eagles. They have a lot of cool adaptations that help protect them from predators and allow them to thrive in the desert. They're built for moving short distances over steep, rocky terrain to escape their predators. Like some of you guys noticed, they thrive up in those rocks. So their hooves have a strong grip to walk over those rocky surfaces. They'll zigzag up and down steep cliff faces, and they use ledges only 2 inches wide, and they'll bounce from ledge to ledge that can be 20 feet apart. And at ground level, they can run up to 30 miles per hour, while on mountain slopes, they can scramble up those rocks up to 15 miles per hour. Their hooves are sharp edged, elastic, and concave. The outer hooves are like toenails, while the soft inner pad helps them grip the surface. And they also have keen eyesight to detect their predators. It helps them to know where to jump and get good foothold in the steep terrain. Their wide set eyes are situated pretty well forward on their head, like you'll notice in these photos, and they provide a wide arc of really good vision. And on top of that, their hearing and sense of smell help them detect and avoid predators. Oh, let me go back 1 second. And one physical characteristic which aids the bighorn to endure the desert's blistering heat is their tan colored hair coat. This light coloring enables the sheep to reflect about 40% of the sun's rays, which reduces their surface heat intake. They do also have sweat glands, but they'll primarily dissipate heat by panting like dogs. But like we mentioned earlier, they'll pretty much remain inactive during the hottest parts of the day and rest in the shade to stay cool. And of course, their iconic horns are another unique adaptation. So both male and female bighorn sheep develop horns pretty soon after birth, and their horns continue to grow throughout their lifetime. Their horns are made out of keratin, the same protein that our hair and nails are made out of. And in this picture, we can see a ewe grooming her horns. Older bighorn sheep will file down their horns on rocks and break pieces off whenever they grow too big and start to get in the way of their vision. Grooming happens whenever the sheep wears down their horns from eating, fighting, and rubbing them against rocks. So if you are out and about and you see a desert bighorn sheep, looking at their horns is a great way to tell the difference between a female ewe or a male ram. So females are the ewes, which have pretty small and light horns in comparison to the rams. They don't tend to curl as much as you can see on the right, like a ram. Older rams have pretty impressive sets of curling horns that can measure over 3 feet long and 1 foot at the circumference of the base. The head and the horns of an adult ram can weigh more than 30 pounds, which is more than all the bones in its body combined. Desert bighorn sheep will use their horns as tools to break open and eat cacti and for fighting. During the rutting season, which we'll talk about in a little bit, dominance is established through these contests where rams clash horns. They will meet head on at a combined speed of about 30 miles per hour. Bighorn sheep actually have double layered skulls for battle protection. And because their skulls are so thick and interesting, doctors are actually looking into them to study concussion research. And because their horns are made of keratin, it's a little bit more flexible and shock absorbing than bone. So they will clash at each other for hours until there is a winner. The winner is the one that gets to mate with the other ewes and pass their genetics onto the lambs. So the horns of bighorn sheep can also tell us how old a ram is. As they age, they start to develop dark colored growth or annually rings around their horns, similar to growth rings around a tree. A ring is created whenever they're under stress, usually caused by rutting or mating rituals, when they're not really thinking about feeding and maintaining their nutrition, but really only trying to breed. The first part of a horn that a ram grows is called a lamb tip, and it usually gets broomed off as the ram's life continues. So, to get an approximate age, we first want to look for the dark 4-year ring, then count the rings towards the skull. So, 4 years old is when bighorn rams have matured enough to effectively start mating, which is the first major stress on their body, and it creates this deeply dark and discolored ring. The 4-year ring is almost always two rings that are around half an inch apart and may appear to be one ring. So, if you cannot see a distinct 4-year ring, then the ram is probably not yet 4 years old. If the 4-year ring is above the ear, then the ram is probably less than 8 years old. And if the 4-year ring is right about at the ear line, then the ram is probably around 8 years old or more. As the bighorn ram matures to 8 years old, the ring gaps become smaller and smaller and they start growing tighter and closer together. We can also look to their body features to determine if the sheep is fairly young or old. Older, mature features are those broomed horns, scarred noses and faces from fighting, big shoulders, narrow hips, and a swayed back. So, does anybody want to type into the chat and take a guess at how old this ram might be? We have a guess for 7, 6. We got some 8s, 6. So I think we're all pretty much guessing around 6 to 8 years old. So I'm going to guess that this is the 4-year line, and then we want to count the rings towards the skull. So we have 4, 5, 6, and 7 years old. Good job. You guys all had really good guesses. It's kind of hard to start trying to age them when you're first starting out. It takes a lot of practice. I'm still learning a lot with it too. So thank you guys for participating in that. So the rutting season that we mentioned earlier is the breeding season, which usually occurs from July to September. During the mating season or the rut, the rams join the female groups and compete for ewes. Their dominance hierarchy is based on age and size, including horn size, which usually prevents rams younger than 7 years old from mating. But the younger males will mate sooner if dominant rams in their group get killed. Before giving birth, adult ewes will isolate themselves in steep, rocky areas. Newborn lambs weigh around 8 to 10 pounds and can walk within hours after birth. Lambs follow their mothers for the first year of life and learn their home range and behavior. Then, when they are around 2 to 4 years old, the young rams follow adult rams away from their birth group during the fall breeding season. Predation is usually not a problem for healthy bighorn populations, but when they are suppressed by other factors, predation can limit recovery and potentially drive a population to extinction. And golden eagles primarily prey on the younger lambs because they have that advantage that some other predators of the desert bighorn sheep don't have, because they can fly above and kind of look and pinpoint a young, weak lamb. So golden eagles will primarily go for those young lambs rather than the larger and stronger adults. More common threats to bighorn sheep are habitat degradation and fragmentation. This is usually caused by humans when we start developing our cities and our roads, and we start entering desert bighorn sheep territory. Then the land that they live in doesn't have as many of the resources they need and is becoming smaller and smaller and more broken up. And car collisions kind of go hand in hand with that. We build roads where desert bighorn sheep are used to roaming around, and sometimes they just get confused because all of a sudden there's a road in the middle of what they were used to, and then they may get hit by cars. But the good news is that there are solutions that are being worked towards to help protect them. And overpasses are being built above highways so that sheep can use them to safely cross those roads. Bacterial pneumonia is one of the biggest, unfortunately, or maybe the biggest threat to our desert bighorn sheep population. When a population is initially infected, as many as one third to 90% of the herd may die. Pneumonia is a disease that humans can get too. It causes respiratory issues, so you can see the desert bighorn sheep having runny noses, coughing, and trouble breathing. They generally just seem weaker and kind of maybe out of it. And the Las Vegas Sun reports that the problem was first identified in 2012 and has afflicted herds of the bighorn sheep all across the United States. So, not just here in Nevada, it's kind of a nationwide problem. Our wild bighorn sheep contract the disease from domesticated sheep or goats, but our wild bighorn sheep don't have immunity to the bacteria. So, following those outbreaks, bighorn sheep survivors often carry the bacteria and transmit the disease to lambs in subsequent years, causing lamb death and poor lamb survival for multiple generations. So, scientists and biologists are doing a lot of work to learn about pneumonia and how to help the sheep. But one interesting thing that they've learned is that it can spread through watering holes. So if a sheep with pneumonia drinks out of a watering hole and another one comes in close contact with it, the other healthy sheep may contract the disease and get sick too. But as we know, water is very scarce in the desert, and Nevada was in a drought for a pretty long while. And just like us, all our animals and wildlife need water. So, NDOW and our volunteers have built these guzzlers to provide additional water sources out in the desert. And it's basically a structure that collects rainwater or snowmelt in these big tanks, which then feed off into these smaller guzzlers for wildlife to use. They can hold from 1,800 to 18,000 gallons of water. Access to water in the summer is crucial, especially for those pregnant ewes, but rams can go up to 3 days without water. And here is a picture of some ewes drinking out of a guzzler. And these guzzlers are built in areas where there isn't enough water to support wildlife without supplemental water resources. So when we are able to again, we may ask volunteers to help build guzzlers for the sheep and other wildlife. We actually had an emergency water haul to 22 guzzlers back in October. If you guys remember, it's pretty dry, not just for us, but of course for the bighorn sheep too. So if you are ever keen on seeing them, you can check out some desert bighorn sheep over at Red Rock. People have been particularly lucky to spot them at the Willow Springs picnic area. And some overpasses along Highway 93 by the Hoover Dam have also been pretty popular with spotting them. And of course, Ash Meadows and the Valley of Fire. But as always, we want to respect our wildlife and stay a safe distance away from them. So if a desert bighorn sheep or any animal for that matter is changing its behavior in response to your presence, then you may be too close. And we want to back up a little and just enjoy from a distance. And if you are ever interested in working with them or helping protect them, these are a few good things to know. They are a game mammal and it requires a tag application to hunt them during the season. So if you are interested in checking that out, go ahead and check out our website. We have great resources for that, as I know tag application season is approaching. And if you are out and about and you see some in their natural habitat, remember to keep that safe distance away for both the safety of you and the animal. And of course, be mindful of our trash. And this goes for all wildlife. They may get sick or injured from our waste or our food. So always make sure to properly dispose of everything. And if you're able to, it doesn't hurt to pick up trash if you see it too. And something to note in particular with bighorn sheep are balloons. What goes up must come down, so I'd advise against releasing balloons. Not only sheep, but any animal for that matter can get injured or die from getting tangled up in the balloon strings or trying to eat the balloon. And lastly, whenever you get the chance and we start asking for volunteers again, we may ask for your help and you could come volunteer with us. We'll ask for help to set up those guzzlers that we mentioned, or count sheep populations, or anything of the sort. So I hope that provided you guys with a good general overview of our desert bighorn sheep. And if you have any questions, go ahead and pop those into the Q&A tab. If not, I'd like to thank you all for attending. And after we end the Zoom, the website will ask you to fill out a survey, and it helps us take in your feedback and give better webinars. And if you can't think of any questions now, but you might come up with them later, my email is listed right here, and you guys can email me if you have those questions or you want to chat or anything at all. And you guys can reach out to me whenever. I see a question that says, is the large pore in front of the eye a scent gland or a sweat gland? Let me go back to a picture of them. Maybe we can take a closer look at them. I think what you may be referring to is kind of like their nose area. They do have sweat glands all throughout their body, but they aren't as effective at cooling the animals down than panting. Are they aggressive animals? Will they charge like a moose will? They are generally not aggressive, but we do want to maintain that safe distance from them, especially during the rutting or breeding season when they may be more territorial and more strongly focused on passing down their genes. And we just don't want to get in the way of that. We want to make sure we're safely away from them. Oh yes, so a couple of the food they eat, we'll go back to their diets. Grasses, forbs, and shrubs. I think I saw a question earlier about the forbs. It's kind of just like a broad category of the plants that are in our deserty area. So they are herbivores and do eat opportunistically, so they'll eat whatever is available to them. Are they common in Reno? They are not as common up there as they are down in southern Nevada, just because they do prefer the desert a little more. Difference between the desert bighorns and Rocky Mountain bighorn. They are overall in the same family, but they have different subspecies. So the desert bighorn sheep is a different subspecies than the Rocky Mountain bighorn, but they are in the same bighorn sheep family, if that makes sense. Is there any way to prevent them from getting pneumonia? That's a really great question. So pneumonia is something that we are still learning a lot about. I can pull back over to that slide. And it was only recently, like back in 2012, when they started noticing it, and they started noticing these large bighorn sheep die-offs. So pneumonia was contracted from domesticated livestock, like domesticated sheep and goats. So the best way for us to prevent pneumonia with our wild populations is to kind of maintain that barrier between them. So if you happen to have domesticated sheep or goats, we want to make sure that they're kind of in the land that they're supposed to be in and won't get too mixed up with possible wildlife like our bighorns, our wild bighorns for that matter. If there are any more questions, go ahead and pop those in. Health issues with the domestic bands of sheep. So the domestic bands of sheep actually have developed they've kind of built up like an immunity to the pneumonia that the wild populations of bighorn sheep have not, which is kind of our problem because the domesticated bands are able to deal with that, but for the wild bighorn sheep, it kind of just results in these massive die-offs. Do they have to wear collars? They do not. It's if they are tagged, then they'll usually see those collars, or if they are domesticated. How many bighorn sheep are in southern Nevada? That is a good question. There used to be thousands of them. I imagine they've kind of dwindled down in their population numbers since then, just because of that habitat degradation and things like that. But they are not listed as they're not listed with the IUCN. They are of least concern, so we are okay with them for now. Can you expect to see the desert bighorn sheep in the Desert National Refuge area just north of Las Vegas? Yeah, I think you would be able to see some out there. They're pretty, I think now would be a good season to look for them too around spring. Pretty common around there, I think. Do you have any stories? I actually do not because I have unfortunately not seen a desert bighorn sheep in the wild. If anybody has any cool stories that they'd like to share, go ahead and throw those into the chat and I'll share those with the rest of our webinar attendees tonight. Thank you all for attending. What part of Valley of Fire? It's generally the whole park throughout. Would be lucky to see some around there. I know it's kind of hard to always pinpoint a spot where we might be able to see them, but they have been spotted pretty frequently in the Valley of Fire. Oh, Claire just mentioned she sees them pretty frequently around the visitor center. There's a grassy field in Boulder City where they come to eat. They love that grass. Oh, someone else mentioned that they saw some at the entrance of the Valley of Fire a few years ago. So it sounds like that entrance in that visitor center for the Valley of Fire seems to be a popular spot for checking out those sheep. Hemingway Park in Boulder City. All right, I think we covered all of the questions so far. If you think of any, we'll hang out for a couple more minutes. If not, thank you all for attending again tonight. Thank you. The presentation was recorded and should be up on our YouTube in a few days. So if you came in late or want to rewatch anything, then you can go ahead and check out our YouTube page. And let me pull up the slide again. And here's my email if you guys have any questions, want to reach out. Thank you. The YouTube page has recordings of all of our past webinars and a few live videos up there as well. And this will be mildly edited and then post it up on our YouTube in a few days. All right, I think we're covered on all the questions again. We'll hang out for just a couple more minutes. Thank you all for attending, and I'd like to thank Claire for moderating for us tonight and answering you guys' questions as well. All right, thank you guys. Have a good night.